What was your frick this shit I'm out moment? Some young woman and an old lady were arguing about stolen underwear in our communal laundry room. Young woman called for her cracked out boyfriend who came running in with a gun, drawn screaming bloody murder. Noped right out. Then moved out that weekend. Recently I was hired by a company to be a foreman. My job was laid out in my interview as follows: plant maintenance and welding. I would run a crew of 4 guys and do odd jobs at a potato plant 10 miles from my house. This is what I have done for other various companies for the last 15 years. After taking the job they asked me to help another foreman doing the same thing at a different potato plant about 80 miles away. I agreed as it was for a few days. Fast forward 3 weeks. I'm still driving 160 miles a day and we have been doing concrete and asphalt prep for a week. Not my vocation. The boss casually mentioned at about 2 in the afternoon that we had to finish a particular part of the project before we left and that we would be there at least till 8 p.m. I told him I couldn't work late on short notice because I had plans and still had to drive home. He said if you don't pick up the pace you will be leaving earlier than that. I told him I agreed, and since this wasn't the job I was hired for, that I was done. He replied with "see ya," and I said probably not. I was hired as a temp. On day 91 I was told that they in fact didn't have to hire me after 90 days and they were gonna keep me on as a temp. I clocked out for lunch and never went back. Just a few weeks ago actually. It's a long story, so I'll try to boil it down to basics. My wife of the last 3 years has cheated on me repeatedly, used her depression as an excuse to abuse our children, manipulated everyone she knows, had repeated breakdowns and refuses medication. About 6 weeks ago she asked me to leave so we could get our crap together. I brought our 1.5-year-old baby with me, and after a few days, to actually think about it, I decided I wasn't coming back and started the process of filing for custody. Edit for clarity, she has a child from a previous relationship that, although I'd love to, I have no legal grounds to file for custody of. We have one child together. I'm not picking favorites and leaving the other to the wolves. I simply don't have legal recourse to file for custody of her. I'm working on a solution to get her out of there, but that's going to take time. Edit 2. Holy crap, oh everyone, thanks for the awards. It wasn't what I was going for, but this support means so much to me. 3. Me and my brother were chilling outside a 7-Eleven talking to a homeless guy, and he offered to take us into an alley and let us try some crack. Still not sure if he wanted to rob us, let us try his crack, or let us try his crackle mayo. Not really so much a frick this crap moment as confirmation of frick this crap. Senior software engineer role at a leading telecom user, one of 3 new devs to join the team. Manager decided it would be best to rotate support between the 3 newbies. Issues every night, sometimes all night. Huge pressure to work 60+ hour weeks with totally unrealistic goals. After a few months I realized this wasn't just a crunch period, this was going to be all the time. After giving notice, manager set me down and told a story of how I'd have to decide what was important and take life seriously. His example was getting a call to come back to the office for an emergency and handing his 2-year-old daughter off to a neighbor he didn't know so he could come work all night. Yeah, frick that. Then my last day the VP pulls the team together and absolutely rips into this guy for taking 20 minutes to support an issue since he was driving home at the time and couldn't log in immediately when called. Frick that crap. Some promoter literally gave me $80 to go into his Vegas strip club with my friends. Said he would throw in the limo and VIP package if we tipped the driver because his other reservation cancelled. When we got there, we got different color wristbands than other people and were told we could only leave their taxi when we left. That was our only option. One friend tried to leave and the bouncer wouldn't let him out. He came back and told us what was up. Nothing was adding up, so we booked it out of the fire exit and down the street. That was how I got paid $80 to go a strip club. Pretty sure we were going to get robbed when we left and would probably have been drunk. I was a shift lead at a fast food joint located inside of a gas station. Our manager was worthless at hiring people, so we were perpetually understaffed for months. I was working 50 to 60 hours a week. Absolutely ridiculous. However, company policy was that there had to be 2 people working at all times. This particular day, someone called out. Nobody would come in to cover the shift, so the manager was forced to stay and work a double. She decided that, since the only reason she was there was because we would have to close otherwise, she was just going to hang out in the office and chat with the gas station employees. 3 hours into my shift, and I have been single-handedly running the front counter, the drive-through, making all the food, doing prep and doing dishes. The dinner rush hit. I had like 4 cars in the drive-through, 8 to 9 people inside, and then I ran out of onions. Because I couldn't get the prep done, my mind just quit. Brain turned off, emotions went cold. I ripped off my headset, told the people inside that they weren't getting their food, walked into the office, and tossed my name tag, manager card, and hat at my boss. When she turned around in shock, all I said was good luck, and walked out the back. I was unemployed, and had a job interview for a cable installer position. The position advertised for $20 an hour, 40 plus hours a week, and benefits, so it seemed like a pretty good deal. I get to the interview and find out it's actually 2 interviews, a group interview followed by one-on-one interviews with the hiring manager. In the group interview, HM explains that the position was actually minimum wage and commission. He also explains that we need to supply our own tools. He then tells us how they assign jobs and we have no choice over which ones we get. Right before the end of the group interview, one of the other guys asks if there were any other expenses we were responsible for, and HM tells us that we had to pay for our own gas, tires, and repairs on our assigned company van. I look out in the parking lot and saw all the vans looked like 20-year-old clapped out pieces of crap. As soon as HM went back to his office, I left. I worked at Produce Market when I was in college. I really needed the job. I literally had empty cabinets and only 1 shelf of food in the fridge on a regular basis. I had been working weekday evenings only for a couple of months, but picked up a Saturday shift. I was helping a customer and the owner walked up and interrupted our conversation. "Is that your yellow car in parking lot?" Me, "Yes." With the most demeaning tone. "On weekends, our parking lot is reserved for customers only. If you value your job, you will go punch out, move your car to the lot across the street, and never park in the lot again." I was astonished. I had full-time jobs every summer since I was 15. I picked up holiday jobs. I had a lot of working experience. I had never been talked to like this by any coworker or boss before, particularly in front of a customer. I told her I was not aware of the parking rules, since I always worked weekdays, took off my apron, handed it to her, and said I will be punching out, but not punching back in. I quit. I told the customer I was sorry I was not able to finish helping him and walked out. I really needed the job, but was so pissed off I could not stand the idea of working there. My supervisor called me that afternoon and tried to get me to come back, but I just couldn't. I'm a middle school teacher, and it's also worth mentioning that I'm a very petite woman and most of my students are bigger than me. Many years ago, when I was considered one of the young and pretty teachers, I was walking down the hall. An 8th grade boy slapped me on the ass and mentioned my car's make and model, implying that he was going to wait for me in the parking lot. I immediately went to my principal, who told me that reporting the incident would reflect poorly on me, and I don't want a complaint like that in my file. I put in my resignation from that particular school the next day. The more I mention it, the more I realize that many teachers have similar experiences. I was roofing and getting paid by the day. After a few months I asked to get paid piecework. My pay for that week was about double, and the boss said he had to put me back to daily rate next week. I said goodbye and started my own business. Was in a forest with a few friends, having some fun being oblivious kids. We had just crossed a small river with a large incline on both sides. We go to the other side and started to walk. I looked at a tree and stopped. I still have no clue what made me feel like stopping. A guy in full grey clothes stepped out from behind the tree and pulled what looked like a gun from his back. For people that may ask, it was just a handgun. Safe to say me and my friends ran as fast as we could without looking back through the forest, crossing the river without caring about the makeshift bridge we built, and ran straight through. When we got out, I realized how bad that could have been. Went with a friend to visit his dad and look for possible jobs in Chicago. While my friend was out job hunting the third day, his dad asked if I wanted to go to a bar with him. Sure. So we go to this hole in the wall of a bar, legit down and alley and backdoor style, entered this dark small room with a 6-foot bar. I'm already questioning whether I should have stayed or left, but here comes the kicker. We get a couple beers from the bartender, who was super nice guy, nothing weird about him until his question. Joining or viewing? My friend's dad cracked and smiled and smacked my back and said just viewing. The guy walks us over to another door and opens it, leading us into a much larger room. And if you haven't guessed it yet, there were about 15 people in the middle of an orgy. Pure exhibition that I was not prepared for at 12:30 PM on a Tuesday. Frick this crap, I'm out. Caught an Uber back and everything. I was working a particularly awful nursing home as a CNA. I was bullied by some of the other CNAs as well as one terrible nurse. I put up with it for a year and put in my 2W notice. I only told management, not the other staff. On my second to last day there, that nurse decided to scream in my face about some imaginary infraction. About an hour later I learned that the company that had bought the facility earlier in the year had decided anyone who'd been working there less than a year on the sale date would not get any vacation days. I'd also only be getting half my sick days paid out when I quit. That meant 5 days of pay. And I learned that if I didn't complete my 2 weeks of notice, I'd forfeit those 5 days. I realized 5 days of pay wasn't worth the abuse I was having to endure, and I told the Don at the end of that day that I was never coming back. She tried to talk me into it, but it didn't work. So that's my frick this crap, I'm out story. I was at a party. It was a bunch of suburban teenagers like myself at the time. There was this dude I didn't recognize walking around and acting super hard, even though he was really scrawny. He finally got to me and was like, "Yo, I got AK-47s for sale. You want one?" I was like, "Dude, shut up. You ain't got crap." He takes me out to his car and opens the trunk. It is full of guns piled on top of one another. Handguns, assault rifles, shotguns, you name it. I ended up sneaking out, hopping in my car and heading home. This dude ended up being an on-foot soldier type for a gang out of the nearest big city. He got arrested a few days later when he got stopped for speeding. The cops searched his car and found the guns. He was only 16. Set the Wayback Machine to the year 2000. All of my friends threw a millennium party. Apparently it was a rager. Nobody tells me about it at all, because the mother of my child is bringing her side guy to it. Finally a couple weeks later one of them tells me that it even happened and what went down. Wrote the whole lot of them off. Spoke to almost none of them again. Best thing I ever did. I was in my mid-20s, working myself to absolute death in a small town office supply store. I mean, the amount of work I was doing as a department specialist was staggering. I was basically working and running half the store myself, so the store manager didn't have to, while the assistant manager above me was doing nothing but taking a paycheck, stealing digital cameras, and lying about being a trained ninja, and staff was kept to a minimum to make store numbers look better. I was just straight up in retail heck. It's also important to note that my store manager was an arrogant, incapable asshole 2 steps from heart failure, who had been shunted to that small town store just to get him out of the way, twice. They'd had to remove him for a while, based on employee and customer complaints, some of them in the vein of sexual harassment. I don't know how he managed to keep his job. Anyway, one day, he comes up to me. He's concerned about my attitude. Customers love you. You know what you're doing. You do great work. But as soon as you're not talking to a customer, your whole attitude changes. You never speak to me with respect or enthusiasm. I can see on your face that you don't want to be here. I mean, look at me. If you just improved your attitude and wanted to be here, you could be me in a couple years. Think about it. So I did. And that night, I went home, applied to go back to school, and quit my job the next day. I took a job in college as a camp counselor at my town summer camp. It was my first time ever working with kids. I wanted to make sure I was nice, but also still considered by them as an authority figure. I worked really hard at being accessible, fun, and responsible. We got our midsummer performance evaluations. Everything scaled on 1 to 5, 1 being bad, 5 being great. Leadership, attitude, engagement, etc. All the usual stuff. My supervisor sat me down and handed me mine. Mostly 1s, a couple 2s. Told me I was going to have to be retrained and will be kept on temporarily on a probationary basis. I stood up, ripped up the evaluation, told them F you, I quit, and walked to my car. Man, was I embarrassed when they chased me down and told me it was a joke and I got all 4s and 5s. I was about 17 and lived in a rural area. Used to hitchhike everywhere. One day I'm in the back of a car, 2 guys up front. They are talking kinda quiet. After a minute or 2 I hear one say back quote okay, but this time we'll go somewhere else. Then he looks in the mirror at me. I looked away out the window, proper crapting my pants. As we went through a village we had to stop at a junction and I blurted something about a friend living nearby, and I opened that door and ran. Probably nothing in it, but I still get chills remembering it. I recently quit my job as a call center worker after 4 years. For background, I worked in customer services for a popular retailer in the UK. During lockdown, when their stores were closed, we had increased sales from online, which also means we got increased call volumes. I busted my ass off to ensure that customers were happy with their purchases and resolved any issues they had to the best I could. One day, we got an email from our CEO saying that, even though we had the highest volume of online sales, we still would not be able to get a bonus due to the virus affecting the business as a whole. I only ever had a bonus once, when I was working there, and I'm used to not getting a bonus. What made me pissed off was that we got absolutely nothing in return. Not a pay increase, not extra holidays, not a token of gratitude, and not even a thank you letter for all the hard work. We also found out a couple days later via the mainstream news that the bigwigs at my company all got a pay rise. At this point, myself and a few other people went frick this crap and we all handed our badges at reception and left. I got a new job a weeks later without any problem and feel even better as a person. This was the first time ever in my life I walked out of a job in anger. Recently worked for a dentist who was committing all kinds of insurance fraud. Now I'm as honest as they come, and this wasn't okay with me, especially knowing my name would be on some of the correspondence. Add to that, this guy was a complete jackass. He thought nothing of berating me in front of patients. I've been doing what I do for a lot longer than him, and that kind of disrespect I won't tolerate. I left for lunch, sent a text saying I was done, and I went home. When my boss told me I didn't have the nerve to quit my job, handed my notice in 10 minutes after he said it. I was working as a network engineer, and due to mismanagement by owner, who took lavish trips every 3 months with family and kids friends, he had a payroll shortfall. His solution was to reduce my medical benefit, which included my family, to just me. Then 3 months later reducing my salary by 30%. When he told me, he also said that he expects me to work 50 to 60 hours a week until profits improve. Then said, "What do you think?" I said, "I quit." I worked for him 13 years. He has called many times to get me to help with special projects for his clients. I have politely refused. Thank you for watching the video. Tell us your stories in the comments below. Happy Spooktober.